Hey there everyone, SQ here. Today I want to talk about a bit more of a broader topic in fighting games, and that is going to be whiff punishing. I get questions all the time asking me, how do you improve at neutral? How do you handle X or Y in neutral? And I would love to kind of just do a video talking about neutral, but quite frankly, that video would be way too long and be way too all over the place because neutral in fighting games has so many different parts that go into it, so many different skills that are involved with neutral. So what I want to do instead is just kind of talk about the separate parts individually in like their own videos, and you can kind of just watch them all at your own pace and put them all together. And today we're going to be talking about whiff punishing. So we're going to be talking about, what is whiff punishing? We're going to talk about why is whiff punishing good. We're going to talk about how to get better at it. And we're also going to talk about how to recognize when you should be looking to whiff punish something compared to using like maybe some other type of method of playing neutral. The first question is, what is whiff punishing, right? Whiff punishing is pretty much, self-explanatory. You just punish your opponent for whiffing a normal. And why is whiff punishing good? I would say the main reason that whiff punishing is strong compared to other neutral options is that it's kind of like a safer option. Because generally speaking, when it comes to whiff punishing, you're going to be doing it on reaction, which means you're only pressing a normal when you see their normal whiff. Most of the other ways that you'd go about playing neutral, ideas is like putting out pokes preemptively to stop your opponent from approaching you, trying to like run in and stuff their button preemptively. Those are all more preemptive actions that are kind of more like guessing, right? And those are valid ways to play, and there's pros and cons to doing those compared to whiff punishing. But the main benefit to whiff punishing is that it's a little bit safer and lower committal, at least in a immediate sense. So that's kind of the main reason that you would really look to use whiff punishing. Is it's kind of a safer, more consistent way to deal with a lot of options in neutral. There are some tools that are kind of meant to be whiff punished. A lot of longer range moves will tend to have more recovery. So you can, make them whiff or whatever and then whiff punish them. It kind of just depends on like the matchup and everything. The main reason to use whiff punishing is that it's safer, lower committal, and it's just another thing that you can kind of represent in your neutral options. The two key components that go into whiff punishing that I would like to kind of bring attention to are going to be anticipation and reaction. Anticipation basically means understanding why your opponent would be whiffing a button, understanding when they're trying to press a button, and anticipating that, right? Like being ready, in this case, for Viken to hit her 2S, right? I'm anticipating that she's going to run at me and press her 2S, and I know that that's going to be happening. Because that leads into the second part, which is reactions. Reacting to the opponent whiffing their button and then whiff punishing them on reaction is kind of what we're going to be talking about here today. There is such a thing as like more preemptive whiff punishes, or kind of whiff punishing as a guess and not really a reaction. But for the most part, I want to focus on whiff punishing as a reaction because it is very, very powerful to be able to do this. If you can see a normal whiff and then whiff punish it on reaction with any amount of consistency, that's going to be very good for you. Being able to react comes with anticipation, right? People don't just whiff punish things randomly and just, kind of autopilot or whatever, right? Most of the time, they have a lot of anticipation behind that whiff punish, right? There is a little bit of an extent where I think once you get super good at fighting games, you can kind of do it on autopilot and not really have to actively think about it. But at the end of the day, there still is a level of anticipation that goes into whiff punishing your opponent. Next question is, how do we actually get better at whiff punishing, right? What are the things that we need to be paying attention to when it comes to whiff punishing, and how do we get better at it? There's kind of two different ways that I like to think about whiff punishing. There's whiff punishing in kind of a defensive method, and then there's whiff punishing in kind of a more aggressive method. I'm going to be using Kai and Viken here in training mode to give some examples of how I would look at whiff punishing, and kind of understanding why you would use whiff punishing in certain situations as opposed to maybe some other options. The first thing that we need to understand is, let's take this example that I have already recorded in training mode, right? This Viken's gonna run up and press 2S, right? The first thing that goes into whiff punishing is that we need to get our opponent to be whiffing normals in the first place, right? That's the first thing that we have to understand about whiff punishing, is that you need to be getting them to whiff the normals in the first place, right? To get that to happen, I would say that like one of the best ways to set that up is using another aspect of neutral, which is going to be poking preemptively, right? Putting buttons out there for the opponent to kind of have to think about and something for them to have to get past, right? It's essentially a wall, putting up a wall for them to have to deal with. And when you have something like, Kai's 2S or his far slash or whatever, and you're pressing these buttons preemptively, the Biken is going to have to kind of try to press her buttons, maybe in a way that could like stuff your buttons or something. Either way, the idea is that you're putting up a threat, right? You're putting something that they have to think about and they have to swing into. Once you have represented these pokes in neutral and you have represented that you're going to control your space, again, this is a whole nother aspect of neutral that I'll probably talk about in another video in the near future. Once you get that, you'll get your opponent to start doing stuff like this, right? You'll get them to start running at you and pressing normals more preemptively or whatever. And that is kind of the first step to getting them, getting it to where you can whiff punish them. You have to get them to whiff buttons, right? The next step after that is, now that you're getting them to press the button, we need to make the button not hit us, right? We need to make sure that it's actually whiffing. And my tip for this is, obviously using movement is very important for this, right? Not being too predictable with how you're moving your character, and making sure there's, active thought behind how you're placing your character is going to be very important to making a move whiff, right? You can't really whiff punish a move if you're having to block it or if you're getting hit by it. Something that a lot of people do when they play fighting games is they try to attack where you are and not where you're going to be. So in the case of this Biken, right, she's going to attack right where I'm at because that's kind of just where she sees us in that moment, right? In the time that she decided, I'm going to run up and press 2S, this is where we were on the screen when she thought about that. So she's going to run up and hit 2S because that's where she thought that's where we were going to be, right? That's where, when she made that decision, we were. Just taking a small step back or even backdashing preemptively can be a great way to just make your opponent whiff. Those little last second movements can be a world of difference when it comes to actually whiff punishing somebody. So like just taking in one small step can be the biggest difference between your opponent's normal whiffing and it not whiffing. So just not being kind of predictable with how you're moving and understanding that once you have your opponent swinging, that gives you more options to just kind of back up, watch them swing, and then whiff punish it, right? Something like this, just like that. And again, the idea is to be swinging on reaction. You're only pressing your button when you see their button whiff. So that's talking about whiff punishing from a more kind of defensive perspective, right? We're trying to keep Biken away from us and we're trying to punish her for trying to approach us, trying to stuff our normals preemptively. Let's talk about whiff punishing from a more aggressive perspective. Let's flip it around. I'm going to switch to us playing as Biken and we're dealing with Kai. Okay, so now the tables have turned, right? We're going to be playing a Biken and we're going to be trying to approach Kai, and we need to use whiff punishing in a more offensively mannered fashion. So how do we do that? How do we actually like get ourselves in a position where we can whiff punish somebody for trying to keep us out? The way that this works is it's kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about, where, if you're trying to keep people out, you want to be putting up pokes and whatnot to keep the opponent away and control your space, right? The way that you whiff punish aggressively is by keeping the opponent second guessing on when you're actually going to approach them. So let's just kind of say that this Kai player is going to press 2S whenever he sees us approach, right? He's going to see us approach and then he's going to press 2S because he's like, oh, they're coming near me. I want to keep them away. I want to control my space. In these situations, again, there are multiple ways you could approach this. There's different options in neutral, right? Like we were just talking about with Biken, I could just try to press a button before he does to counter hit him out of his normal. However, you can use whiff punishing aggressively as well, which again is a little bit of a safer option. It's lower commit than trying to press the button preemptively. As we were just going over, if you're pressing buttons preemptively, you leave yourself open to being whiff punished, right? What do you do in this situation? How would you actually get Kai to whiff? You just stop early, right? You just act like you're going to approach and then stop early, get him to whiff as normal, and then you can whiff punish. Guilty Gear Strive specifically has a pretty useful mechanic for doing this, which is faultless defense breaking, or FD breaking as most people call it, which is just tapping FD as you're dashing to kind of stop your character immediately where you want them to. Normally, if you don't do this, your character will slide a little bit, which isn't really the end of the world. You can still use that. But sometimes FD breaking just to stop yourself at like that perfect spacing could be what you need. So in this case, we can stop ourselves early and then maybe whiff punish with something like I don't know what Biken uses. I don't actually play Biken, but you get the idea. You can just stop yourself a little bit early and then whiff punish them with something like a far slash or whatever. So when it comes to being the aggressor and you want to whiff punish somebody, it comes down to really using your movement well and understanding that, if someone's trying to control space, all you got to do is threaten that you're going to approach, right? Threaten that idea that you're going to get into their space. And then instead of approaching, you just stop a little bit early and then whiff punish them for it. I did mention there's also like an idea of wish punishing, as some people would jokingly call it, which is the idea of kind of looking to whiff punish with a more preemptive action, Lycan actually has that in her Kabari. I just wanted to mention it real quick because with something like Kabari, you know, you could do something like this as a more like, you can't really do this on a reaction, right? Kabari is too slow to do it on a reaction. But it's also not the most risky thing to kind of throw out in a situation like this if you are expecting your opponent to be pressing buttons preemptively. That's pretty much it for whiff punishing. You know, when it really comes down to it, it just comes down to understanding how to use your movement, understanding how to get your opponent to be pressing buttons in the first place, and then understanding how to use your movement to make them whiff those buttons. Again, there's a lot of different aspects that go into neutral, and I feel like all of them will make more sense once we get all of these different videos out and you can kind of look at them at your own pace. This type of content is definitely experimental for me, so let me know down in the comments below what you think about it. Do you have any other questions? And if there's any other topics you'd like me to go over in this regard, whether it's about Strive specifically or just fighting games in general, do let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please drop a like and consider subscribing. Really helps me out. I also do stream 5 or 6 days a week over on Twitch. You can find a link to that down in the description below. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.